Pictured here is someone under investigation for some very serious crimes. They're a threat both to New York and society as a whole. And next to him is Luigi Mangione. The Luigi Mangione case continues to baffle and amaze people worldwide, but it is Americans who continue to have a very special bond with both the accused and the case itself. And a ton has happened since I put out the first video on this topic, so if you haven't seen that one, I will link it in the description and you should be able to click it here as well. Luigi has been extradited from Pennsylvania to New York City on the murder charges for CEO Brian Thompson. He initially did try to delay that extradition, but it appears he only did that as a tactic to gain effective counsel in New York before moving over. This isn't an uncommon tactic, so I'm not really surprised that he initially did fight that extradition. He was obviously able to gain that effective counsel, which isn't hard to do, both when you come from family money and when you have an entire country, essentially, supporting you. The funds needed were raised really quickly for his counsel, the details of which we'll get into shortly. But whether he had to pay for it himself or the American people paid for it for him, either way, he was able to secure that effective counsel pretty easily. And while fighting that extradition is quite common, what happened once he arrived in New York City was far from common. Instead of moving him quietly through the night in a low key event, New York City Mayor Eric Adams moved him in the perp walk of the century. It seemed like every guy that was available, whether that was a police officer, a politician, a SWAT member, a guy that had a flat top haircut, sunglasses, or a windbreaker, were all available and wanted to take part in something that seemed like it was ripped right out of the Joker movies. Handcuffed and shackled, Luigi seemed largely unbothered by this waste of tax dollars outside of some minor annoyance that was visible. Unlike other times when he was being shuffled from place to place, he didn't seem to have any statement he wanted to offer to the general public. Instead, he just walked that mile long walk with every windbreaker and cop available in the city. And I can't stress enough how much of a dick measuring contest this is, and just looking at the pictures truly annoys me. As I mentioned in the intro, Mayor Eric Adams was there showboating for everyone to see, which I find interesting considering the charges that he's fighting on his own end. The details of which we will certainly get into momentarily, but my thought is on this perp walk that maybe the mayor wanted to seem like he was tough on crime and that he couldn't be capable of committing his own crimes on his own time, which we now know isn't true. And let's not forget that in this country, at least currently, people are innocent until proven guilty. It's written down as a matter of law. And that means both the man that is shackled like an animal and the mayor leading this procession are both equal in terms of the law. They are both being accused of crimes, and yet one gets to make this perp walk while the other one has to be shackled and shoved around like an animal. So, in the eyes of the law, both the man that is shackled and being held at gunpoint and the mayor that organized all of this are equals. They're both being accused of a crime. They both have to face consequences if they are found guilty of that crime. So, why is it that one is treated this way while the other gets to not only walk free, but treat other human beings like this? And maybe the mayor won't face any consequences for his actions, or maybe he will. It's really hard to know. But we do know that there is a very systematic pattern of people not facing consequences. For instance, the now murdered Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, was arrested on DUI charges. Much like his career and life's work in healthcare, he decided on that day in 2017 that not only did the people's lives around him not matter, but his own also did not matter when he decided to get very drunk and get behind the wheel of a vehicle. He spent a measly 2 days in the jail, paid a fine, pled guilty to a lesser charge of fourth degree DUI, making it a misdemeanor instead of a felony, and virtually faced no consequences from there. He did not lose his career. He did not lose his license. He did not have to spend any significant time in a jail cell. And it didn't matter what he had done. And I don't bring this up to bash the dead. That's not the point of it, although I'm sure my annoyance of it is probably a little bit obvious at this point. I simply bring it up because of the stark contrast between how these accused criminals are being treated. For Brian Thompson, those problems went away within days. For the mayor, they may still go away, but he still has this potential looming over him. And for Luigi Mangione, he gets paraded around at gunpoint. And I would love to know why it's okay to treat these accused criminals as differently as they are, but that's one of those questions where we'll probably never have a satisfactory answer for it, so you may as well just ask it into a void or a brick wall. But going back to Luigi, after the public sort of got past the initial shock of this unprecedented perp walk, they did notice another difference with Luigi, specifically to his appearance. It is important to note that if he is in fact the person that committed this murder against Brian Thompson, then he would have been on the run for several days at the time of arrest. But the rough and unshaven Luigi we were introduced to originally was a very different one than we were seeing in this New York procession. He was clean shaven, had his eyebrows shaped, and even had a haircut. This could simply be a choice based on the knowledge that he would be in front of many cameras and in front of many different eyes, and he just wanted to be presentable. But many people do have the theory that this is coming from the inmates that he was with in Pennsylvania. They're saying that this could be a sort of signal that he is being taken care of within the walls of the jail. This would be an indicator that he is being not only watched over as far as what his appearance is and what he may need within the jail, but then also the people that helped him with that appearance have his back, meaning don't mess with him. He has people that would be on his side and willing to support him. And I have looked into that theory. I've seen a lot of people speaking on that theory, but what I haven't found is any sort of concrete evidence that that's exactly what's happening. So I would advise to take that theory with a grain of salt. And if the inmates have his back, they're very far from the only ones. In fact, recently at the United Healthcare corporate home office, there was the words deny, defend, depose spray painted onto a retaining wall. The words were obviously sprayed in a crude manner and not at all by an artist, but it does serve the purpose of sending a message. Although there have been instances of this phrase being put on other walls in random places that have no relation, this one was bold. It was right outside the main office. There was no way that it couldn't be seen. It was just very clear who that message was made for. They wanted everyone to know that we as a society have not forgotten. It doesn't matter that Luigi was arrested. We haven't forgotten the reason the murder took place to begin with. And while whoever put that up obviously had Luigi's back, or at least the back of whoever the murderer may be, whether they be one and the same or not, again, this is far from the only person that does have his back. As of Christmas Eve, over $200,000 was raised for the defense fund of Luigi. The bulk of these funds was given through a company called Gibbs and Go, although initially there was a fund on GoFundMe, the more commonly used site, but GoFundMe did state that it was against their terms of service to raise funds for the legal defense of a violent act. All of the funds that were collected on GoFundMe before that was shut down was refunded back to the people that gave those funds to begin with. The new site being used, the Gibbs and Go, has put out a statement that as of this time, the fundraiser has not violated any of its rules or use of service. For anyone interested in either looking at that fundraiser or donating themselves, I will put that in the link of the description as well. Meanwhile, over on Amazon, there was a ton of merch that was popping up that either had the likeness of Luigi on it or the words deny, defend, oppose. However, all of those listings have been deleted with no further listings being approved. And it's not hard to imagine why the CEO, Jeff Bezos, would be uncomfortable with the idea of the glorification of a crime where a rich CEO was murdered. It's not like half his company over at Amazon is currently striking due to low pay and poor working conditions, all while he spent $600 million on his most recent wedding. That would be crazy, wouldn't it? As far as actual courthouse support goes, there was a small amount of people that were allowed into the courthouse for the initial hearing. And initially, the general media was trying to put out a few different stories that indicated there was about 2 dozen women or girls that waited outside the courthouse in the cold just to try to get a glimpse of Luigi or try to get into the courthouse. However, there were a lot of people that went live on different forms of social media, and those lives showed that there was actually a lot of diversity in the people that were there to support Luigi, and that diversity went across genders, races, ages, backgrounds, everything that you can think of. So it's important to remember that traditional media also is sort of controlled by the money that comes into it. And now more than ever, it's really important to check several different sources to get the entire picture, just because of that inherent biases that comes from donations that come into those media offices. And them running with the story of women just fangirling over him is no exception. Once in the courthouse, both Luigi and his lawyer came out with matching outfits. Whether or not that was intentional, I really don't know, but I didn't have time to linger on that thought very long just because Luigi's lawyer truly came out swinging.
I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial in this case. He is entitled to a presumption of innocence, but unfortunately, the way this has been handled so far, his rights are being violated. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. He was cooperative at all accounts. There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea was in their arsenal. And I just want to put on the record statements that the mayor made publicly about my client. Nothing saying alleged, for example. And he said, I wanted to send a strong message with the police commissioner that we're leading from the front. I'm not going to just allow him to come into our city. I wanted to look him in the eye and state, you carried out this terrorist act in my city, the city of New York that I love. And he wanted to show symbolism. Your Honor, he's not a symbol. He's somebody who is afforded the right to a fair trial. He's innocent until proven guilty. And the mayor was talking to jurors, future potential jurors that elected him. I just want to make a record of this and put everyone on notice that this has to stop.
She was clearly laying the groundwork for the defense, as she pointed out the unfair treatment of Luigi, the unprecedented perp walk that was put on by the New York City mayor who had pending charges against him, even as of now. Luigi himself didn't really have much to add, really isn't supposed to at this point in time within the trial. The only thing he had to say was that he entered into a not guilty plea.
Charging the crime of murder in the first degree and other related charges. How do you plead to this indictment, sir? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
That trial is set to begin in early 2025, but the idea of that trial is really bringing some concerns to light, at least for me. The first and foremost issue is with the trial judge that we have currently, Catherine Parker. And you may be wondering why it is that I would have an issue with a judge that I've never really heard of before and hasn't necessarily been high profile, but I have several issues with her, in fact. The first of which is her very clear conflict of interest that is seemingly really being ignored at this point. If you look at the bare bones of this case, there is a person being accused of murdering the CEO of a major healthcare company. Now, those very bare bones details matter because Catherine Parker, who holds the fate of this accused, happens to own hundreds of thousands of dollars in stock within the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry. And not only does she own this hundreds of thousands of dollars in stock, her husband Brett Parker is the vice president and assistant general counsel of Pfizer, one of the largest pharmaceutical and healthcare companies in the entire world. I genuinely cannot think of a more appropriate time for a judge to recuse themselves based on personal biases and conflict of interest. This is a highly politicized case due to the ramifications of that murder. And yet this judge, who is personally vested into healthcare and pharmaceutical industries prospering just as they are, is allowed to oversee this highly politicized case. This case that holds multiple ramifications depending on its outcome on both the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries as a whole. But this continues to be an issue, specifically with the Luigi case, as many politicians have made the point to speak out both against Luigi and the crime he's accused of, all while they fill their pockets with the top campaign contributions from United Healthcare or companies like them. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that there isn't a systematic conflict of interest from everyone involved. The optics of this case have tainted any jury pool that could possibly be convened. The media, politicians, lawmakers, other CEOs, the mega rich, all have made sure to condemn not just the crime that was committed, but specifically Luigi himself. There is not one person that they could pull to be put on this jury that doesn't already have their mind made up of guilt or innocence, which directly conflicts against the justice system and how it was meant to operate. In my last video, I already discussed the possibility of jury nullification, in which they could recognize the possible guilt of the person, but still by law not find them guilty based on the fact that they believe the actions were justified or needed. However, there is a larger possibility of a hung jury, meaning not the entire jury can come to one single conclusion. And that is because, unlike the scores of school shooters that we've had over the past few decades and other people who may have deserved the charge, Luigi alone was charged not only with murder, but also with terrorism and 20 other charges in relation to the fake identity, ghost gun, and other materials of the case. And with those charges, specifically the terrorism charge, that means he will be charged federally. And being charged federally with those crimes means he is eligible for the death penalty. So, to clarify, a person can go to Walmart, pick up an automatic rifle legally, drive to an elementary school, take the lives of dozens of young children in seconds, and is not charged federally or as a terrorist. But one single man can take one single weapon and take the life of a rich, elite CEO, and that makes him a terrorist and be eligible to be put to death under the death penalty. In what world is any of this fair? In what world is this the spirit of the law as it was intended when it was written? In what world can he possibly receive a fair trial when the people in charge of this trial benefit personally from him being punished as harshly as possible? The truth is, he can't receive a fair trial, and this isn't being handled according to the law. This is the rich and the elite reaching out for retribution against someone who would dare take the life of one of their own. For the very first time, they are afraid for their lives. For the very first time, their safety is not guaranteed. Make no mistake, it does not matter to them if you or I were murdered today. They wouldn't bat an eye at it, as they haven't historically. But the world has and will continue to turn upside down the moment their wealth or their life is at risk. I do not know if Luigi is guilty. Only he knows that with 100% certainty. And that's the way that our system is designed to be, innocent until proven guilty. But if you want to know how systematic the injustice is to the most vulnerable people of our population, you can ask any minority. This has been happening to them since the existence of our country to begin with. They continue to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. This is just the first time that it is so widely publicized. They, more than anyone, know that innocent until proven guilty has never applied to the rich, to the elite of our country. Like Brian Thompson, who had his DUI swept under the rug like it never happened. Like this judge, who is required to recuse herself anytime there is a conflict of interest, and yet refuses to. Like our incoming president, who has been convicted of 34 separate felonies and will face no consequences from any of them. Like the governor of Pennsylvania, who uses one hand to shovel money into his pocket that comes from the healthcare industry, while using his other to point the finger at anyone who dare threaten their prosperity. And like the mayor of New York City, who is heading to trial on charges of bribery and illegal use of campaign funds. And maybe I could take this mayor more seriously if he had treated all high-profile crimes in his city just as he is treating this one. For instance, the woman who was set on fire on a subway recently and left to burn alive. Surely he kept up the same energy for that crime and put in just as much effort to finding her killer. As you could probably guess, absolutely not. There was no manhunt. Police officers were both pictured and videoed casually walking past this woman who was burning alive, offering no help, all while walking past a man sitting on a bench who also watched this woman burn alive. That man who was sitting on the bench, casually watching, happened to turn out to be the murderer. None of those police officers stopped that person, asked them any questions, detained them on any sort of suspicion, or helped the woman who was actively on fire. Instead, that was one of the train conductors who found a fire extinguisher and finally put out the woman after she was already burnt beyond recognition and dead. And in fact, the killer was not caught by police. The mayor did not direct any sort of manhunt to find them. There was, however, some viral videos of the incident, and someone who recognized the killer from that viral video called the police to turn in that killer. At no point did the police do any work to help find the killer or prevent this from happening, and at no point did the mayor put in any ounce of effort to prevent this killing, to stop it, or to find the killer. So no, I can't take him seriously when he decides he wants to parade Luigi around like he's tough on crime, all while he lets the people of his city burn, and all while he's facing his own charges and likely to go to prison. This case with Luigi has rattled me to an extent I can't really explain. I've obviously known for a long time how corrupt the system can be, but the further I look into this case, the more obvious it is that there is runaway power from the rich and elite and politically affluent people within our country. And I also don't condone murder. I'm not calling for further violence, but that doesn't mean I can't understand the motivation behind the crime that Luigi is being accused of. And maybe the murderer is Luigi, maybe it isn't. But is there really anyone out there who can't understand the reason why this happened? If you are one of those people who don't understand why this has happened and you're watching this video, I just want to know, aren't you tired? Haven't you also had enough? Is your life really going that well that you can't understand that it isn't for most people? There will be a lot more to come in early 2025 when the trial officially starts. The purpose of this video was really to cover those new developments in the trial, but also to give a voice to the frustrations that I think a lot of us are currently feeling. I don't know how many people this video will reach, but to anyone watching who feels hopeless and alone and frustrated, you aren't alone, and you aren't wrong to feel that way. I sincerely want to thank every single person watching this video. I will obviously be keeping up to date with this case and updating all of you as I get those updates. So if you would like to keep track of that with me, please don't forget to subscribe. I hope you all have a peaceful and fulfilling day.